Welcome to Sticklers Unite's Guide to Semicolons Made Ridiculously Easy. This guide assumes that you're at least remotely familiar with the approach to punctuation taken in the book Crash Course for the ACT by the Princeton Review. If you haven't ever seen that approach, I highly recommend you check out that concept first in an accompanying video before watching this one. To understand how semicolons work, we need to remember that all sentences are made out of at least one clause or idea. I personally prefer the term idea because it's just a little simpler and to the point. For example, here is a sentence that contains one complete idea. I like dogs. Most of the sentences that we speak and write don't just have one simple idea inside of them, but rather many ideas combined into a larger sentence. For example, here we have a sentence that contains two clauses or ideas. I like dogs, but I hate cats. We used a comma and the word but to combine the ideas I like dogs and I hate cats. Semicolons and the other marks that you see on this side of the stop and go chart are used to combine two or more ideas in a sentence when both of those ideas are what we call an independent clause or a complete idea. In other words, if you could chop the sentence in half and both of the ideas would be sentences by themselves without any problems, then you are dealing with this kind of a situation and you would want to use one of these kinds of marks. So there's actually a really simple rule that we can use for semicolons, but you might even say it's a little controversial in the punctuation world. But using this simple rule, you can use semicolons correctly more than 90% of the time. And here's our rule. You can use a semicolon literally anywhere you can use a period. Anywhere. That's it. No joke. But wait, you might be saying, and I'm sure there's some English teacher somewhere too thinking that, it really can't be that simple, can it? Well, to be sure, all we need to do is compare these different punctuation marks found on the same side of the stop and go punctuation chart. If you really think about it, what is really the difference between a period and an exclamation mark? They're both found on the same side of the stop and go chart. They're both used in a situation where they go in between two complete ideas. Pause the video for a second if you want and think about it. What is the real difference between these two marks? Well, if you really think about it, a period and an exclamation mark both go at the end of a sentence. So really the only difference between them is that a period is used as a simple kind of a stop, and an exclamation mark is used when you want to stop but show some emotion or emphasis to that sentence. Ending the top sentence with a period makes it a simple statement. I like cheese. But if you were really emotional about it for some reason, like, I don't know, maybe you go to like cheese conventions every year. I like cheese! Right? I mean, we're using the exact same words. Literally, the only difference between using a period and an exclamation mark is the extra type of feeling or emotion that the exclamation mark conveys. But the grammar of the two sentences is exactly the same. Just to drive this point home, let's compare a period and a question mark. What is the real only difference between using a period at the end of a sentence and using a question mark at the end of a sentence? Well, as you already know, a period, once again, is a simple stop, and a question mark, is used to ask a question, right? So, once again, they both go at the end of complete sentences. The only difference is the extra feeling or idea that a question mark conveys that a period does not. So ending the top sentence with periods makes it a simple declaration of fact. It's the best, really. Whereas the bottom one, suddenly with question marks, becomes, it's the best, really? Once again, we're using the exact same words. It's the exact same type of grammatical situation. The only difference between the top and the bottom, between a period and a question mark, is that the question mark is conveying an extra feeling or idea that the period does not. So just to drive this home, on the left side of the stop and go chart with the period, the exclamation mark, the question mark, etc., the grammar job that these marks do is essentially the same. The types of sentences they connect are exactly the same. The only difference is the feeling or the implication that these marks convey by nature of what they are. So this finally brings us back to our friend the semicolon. Just like the period, exclamation mark, and question mark, the semicolon is on the left side of our stop and go chart because it's used to combine two complete ideas, or independent clauses, if you want to call them that. And so, in other words, words, you can use a semicolon anywhere that you would use a period. The exact same grammatical situation, the exact same kinds of sentence constructions. But wait, you might say. If that's true, why would we want to use semicolons at all then? Why don't we just use periods all the time? Well, that's easy to answer. Why do you sometimes use a question mark or an exclamation mark instead of a period? As we said, it's to convey some sort of extra idea or feeling that the period by itself does not convey. The same goes for a semicolon. The difference between a semicolon and a period is that a semicolon implies a stronger connection between ideas than a period does in that same place in between the ideas. Since punctuation marks direct the flow of ideas in a way that's very similar to how traffic signs direct the flow of traffic, I like to compare periods and semicolons to stop signs. Of course, when you see a stop sign, you're supposed to bring your vehicle to a full and complete stop. And hopefully everyone does. But there's a stereotype in California or in Utah where I live that many drivers are not the best and sometimes don't do that. Some drivers will slow down their car almost all the way to a complete stop, but they're just so impatient that they let their car slide through as long as no one else is coming. I've heard that described as a California stop, and I've heard that described as a Utah stop. And basically, if you're doing that with the flow of your ideas, you're coming almost to a stop, but you're not going to a complete stop, that's like a semicolon, right? There's a stop there, but it's not as complete and full of a stop as with a period. Just to make sure we get that, here's a quick example of the difference between using a period and a semicolon. Up here we've got with the period. It was too late. The wolves were howling. Those are two ideas, and they seem like they're probably related to each other. But really with the period, you can do any random series of sentences with a period in between them. I like cheese. My aunt is named Wanda. I have been to France before. But when we use a semicolon instead of a period, something interesting happens. Let me read it for you. It was too late. The wolves were howling. Using a semicolon instead of a period suggests a stronger connection to the reader. Now it's very clear that the reason why the wolves are howling is because it's too late in the night. So using a semicolon is kind of like that California stop. We didn't quite cut off the connection between these two ideas. Periods are used to separate two complete sentences, the same way that semicolons are used to separate two complete ideas that form a larger sentence. The only real difference between the period and the semicolon is that the semicolon is a slightly shorter pause. It's like a partial stop that shows that there is a stronger connection between the two ideas, often some kind of cause and effect connection. To be fair, there is another use of the semicolon, which I see a lot of people refer to as using the semicolon as a super comma, which is when you have a long, complicated list like you see here, and you use the semicolon to provide some sort of additional degree of separation in the list. However, that is a separate use that we're not really discussing here. We're focused on how you use semicolons 90% of the time, which is to join together two complete ideas into a larger sentence in the same situation where you'd use periods. So if you're still struggling to use semicolons correctly sometimes, let me just repeat that one simple rule that will be correct like literally 90 to 99% of the time. You can use a semicolon literally anywhere you can use a period. Just put the semicolon instead of the period, change the uppercase letter of the next sentence to a lowercase letter, and just keep the sentence going. As long as you're trying to imply some sort of connection between those two ideas, it's really that simple.